Good evening. This meeting of the Romulus Board of Education is called to order at 6 o'clock p.m. Ms. Beard, can you do roll, please?
Can. Mrs. Bowles? Here. Mrs. Kraut?
Here.
Mrs. Funderburg?
Here.
Mrs. Buckley?
Here.
Mr. Theed is excused. Mrs. Beard's present. Mr. McLaughlin?
Present. We can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda. The chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
It's been moved by Ms. Funderburg, supported by,
No, that
I'm
was
sorry,
Buckley.
the other way around.
Yeah, Ms.
Been moved by Ms. Buckley, supported by Ms. Funderburg. Any questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 6-0. We have approval of a field trip on the agenda. I do have a form here. Ms. Betty Santo would like to talk to the board about this. Betty, if you can please use the mic so people in TV land can hear you, please. They'll hear us on YouTube.
Okay. Is it on? Okay. Just basically, I saw Dr. Daniels this morning. It became aware to me just before Easter break that there was a concern about the bus or transportation to Cedar Point this year. And it's basically what it narrowed down to was the concern among the board members regarding the, what do I want to say, the wear and tear on the buses. And, you know, basically this year, and I sent an email to Ms. Fundenberg, and she was going to forward it to a few of you because we tried to access the website for Romulus, and there's not an easy access to websites. But I wanted you to see the students' actual website that we have at Romulus Middle School and what the students have accomplished this year. And I really feel bad about going in front of them and saying there's no Cedar Point trip this year at the end of the year. If I would have been more aware of the situation at the beginning of the year, we could have planned something different. But our students have worked very hard. They've done a great amount of community service, and if you do get a chance to look at the website, we'd appreciate it. We still would like to take this trip this year. We're only taking one bus, 34 students, and there'll be 6 staff. We would like to then next year revisit the situation with Cedar Point and possibly pick other venues within the area that we would be able to do as a fun and a way to say thank you to our students for everything that they did for the whole year. So I would still like to take this trip if at all possible.
Thank you. With that, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the field trip to Sandusky, Ohio, Cedar Point on May 25th, 2013 for the Romulus Middle School FCCLA as proposed at no cost to the district.
Support.
It's been moved by Mrs. Buckley, supported by Mrs. Funderburg. I'm sorry? I honestly didn't hear you.
The band gets to go then.
Probably. Probably. Are there any other questions or concerns?
Just a comment. I talked to Ms. Santo earlier today, and one of the things because it was on the agenda, I still have the email. I can forward it so that our board members have the link. But I know one of the things that we had really been kind of bouncing back and forth was exactly the wear and tear on the buses. And, you know, my memory kind of failed me as far as I know that we had talked about it last year, and then I guess we're revisiting it again. And so one of the comments that I wanted to make was that, you know, I think we should probably honor the field trips that are going to be on the docket for this year, but that if we are going to make that a resolution or a proclamation amongst the board, then it needs to be something that we do prior to the upcoming year, so then we can give all of our organizations and groups prior notice on having to make future plans. So that we're being fair to all groups.
And that's exactly what the conversation was. And, you know, Ms. Funderburg did call me today,
Yeah.
and I had informed her that I had been made aware that this was on the agenda. Excuse me. And what we had said, I believe, at the last meeting when we had field trip requests is for this year, we'll probably, that doesn't mean to say we will, because each thing is on its own merits, but we will probably honor those routine field trips this year, and the administration with the board will make a recommendation for next year based upon, again, the wear and tear, the bus routes and things. One thing, board members, that comes into play here is this is a Saturday trip, so it's not gonna pull, excuse me, I'm sorry, it's not gonna pull any of our drivers off their routes, so, you know, that's something to consider as well.
And another thing, if I can interject, it's also, you know, almost at the very end of the school year. So that was another thing. I know when we had an opportunity to talk, and the conversation that we had was something similar, that we would see what we could do for this year to try to honor them, but recognizing that we were working with a, you know, a fleet that's aging, you know, we might have to, you know, take some other things under consideration. But I do feel that the activity itself has great merit, and I think in their planning, when they plan it, so that it is on a Saturday, so that kids are not being pulled out from, you know, regular instruction. And because it is so close to the end of the year, I think that that was another reason why, you know, I was in full support of the trip.
I'd like to make a comment. I don't have a problem personally with the trip itself, but looking at all the difficulties that we're having right now with the buses, I would say, once I was aware of just how bad the situation is with our bus situation, and then just the whole idea of the bus routes and how all the confusion that it's gonna cause. I understand at this particular time it doesn't cause that particular, but just in general, just the whole wear and tear, that's still, I'm looking at still, that's still a problem in itself. And, you know, I don't have a problem with the trip itself, but I would have to say that, you know, if we can't afford it, we can't afford it. And it's nothing personal of in any way. You know, I would love to see every kid go to whatever trip they would like to go to personally. But if we can't afford it, we can't afford it. And, you know, so for me personally, I would have to say from here on out, as I have been doing once I was made aware of the bus situation and the different routes, and having to see if we would have to pay extra for bus drivers and all of this other information that came across the board, I have to take all that into consideration, and I have to look at the whole big picture as a whole. And so because of that, I'm going to go head on and just as I've been doing since I've been made aware of that, and say for here on out, personally, I would have to say I'm going to have to say no on it, personally. That's just how I feel about it. It's nothing personal against the kids. I want to see them go on the trips, but I have to look at the situation that we're in right now. And in regards to this particular trip, I haven't had a chance to look it over. I do understand that you all said it may have been on the agenda, but on the agenda that was sent to me, it just said old business and new business. This was not on there at all. It was the first time of me seeing this is of right now. So I'm not going to make a judgment on it either way. For this particular one, I'm going to say I abstain from this one, but I will say, and that's because I haven't even looked at it. I haven't even had a chance to even glance at it before it's just sitting in front of me. But from here on out, I have to say I have to do it that way. It's nothing personal against the kids.
I agree. At the same time, just to keep in mind that I have had a grant in the district for quite a few years, and it does compensate for the bus driver and the bus and the transportation. We're able to cut down the cost of the trip for the students because we know it can be a hardship on the students because of the grant. So we're fortunate that we can incur those costs for the bus and so forth. It's the wear and tear that, you know, other than paying for the use of the bus.
I understand that.
So we're looking forward to this trip, but then next year we would definitely have to reevaluate where we go and what we're going to do.
Anything further? Hearing nothing, the motion is on the floor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I abstain.
Motion carries 5-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is nothing under other. Communications and expressions from the public. I only had one. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Yes, sir.
Good job on the Romulus basketball team, the state finals, and go blue tonight.
Thank you, absolutely. With that, we will go into questions and concerns of board members. Mrs. Bowles?
None.
Mrs. Kraut?
None. Oh, I do
Go
want to mention that, ask for a calendar for April.
She will make a note. Mrs. Funderburg?
None.
Mrs. Buckley?
None. Thank you.
Mrs. Beard?
None.
I have none. Thank you. At this time, the Board of Education will need to go into executive session for purposes of personnel and negotiations update. The chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we go into executive session for personnel and negotiations update.
Support.
It's been moved by Ms. Buckley, supported by Mrs. Funderburg. Ms. Beard, could I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Mrs. Bowles?
Yes.
Mrs. Kraut?
Yes.
Mrs. Funderburg?
Yes.
Mrs. Buckley?
Yes.
Mrs. Beard, yes. Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes. We are in executive session at 6:13 PM. Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to go back into open session.
So move. I move that we go back into session. Support.
It's been moved by Ms. Funderburg, supported by Ms. Buckley, that we go back into open session. Ms. Beard, can you do roll, please?
Yep. Mrs. Bowles?
Here.
Mrs. Kraut?
Yes.
Mrs. Funderburg?
Yes.
Mrs. Buckley?
Yes.
Mrs. Beard, yes. Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes. We are in open session at 7:30 PM. Board members, before we adjourn, you have a packet here. I want to thank Mrs. Beard for coming in this morning and helping me go through these packets. This is a packet of your confidential information. It is all of the packet information for all of the candidates for the superintendency. Please keep in mind, again, these are confidential. You also received an email today from Marie Miller with an additional reference letter. Please disregard it. I had a conversation with Ms. Miller. That letter was submitted to her after the deadline. I informed her that the deadline exists for a reason. We will not accept any documentation from any candidate after the deadline. We're not going down that slope. If it wasn't in, it's not in. Your packets are numbered based upon the applicant number. Please, if we have any conversation, refer to the number, not the name. They are the same in each packet. Please review the packets this week. Monday, next week, is our special meeting that we'll be meeting with Marie to discuss these candidates and decide as a board who we will invite for an interview. That will be done by consensus majority. If 4 or more board members agree to a candidate, we will extend an invitation for interview. Please revert to your packet. Maria is also going to send us an email reminding us of our homework to formulate questions that we will get ready to go through when we start the interview process at the end of the month. Okay? Any questions on that part?
I had one and it just went poof.
Okay, chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Buckley, supported by Ms. Funderburg. Any questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.